On January 3rd, 2026, the headlines were burning. The impossible happened. A military extraction, an arrest, a regime decapitated. But as the dust settles in Caracas and the world debates the legality of the U.S. intervention, the people of Venezuela are left staring at the same empty shelves they saw last week, the same rusted pumps, the same worthless bolivars. We look at Venezuela today, a nation shattered, its leadership in handcuffs, its streets patrolled by foreign boots. And we ask the question that has haunted economists for 2 decades. How does a country sitting on 300 billion barrels of oil, more than Saudi Arabia, more than Russia, end up with a GDP comparable to a war zone? To understand why the rescue mission of 2026 faces a near impossible task, we have to look past the recent chaos. We have to go back to when the poison was first tasted. The tragedy of Venezuela did not begin with a bus driver named Maduro or even a paratrooper named Chavez. It began with a geological lottery win. In the early 20th century, Venezuela struck oil, massive, sticky, heavy crude. For decades, this was the Venezuelan dream. By the 1950s, Venezuela was the 4th wealthiest nation per capita on Earth. It was the Paris of South America. The Concorde flew there. But underneath the glamour, cancer was growing. Economists call it Dutch disease. When you export massive amounts of oil, foreign cash floods your economy. Your currency becomes incredibly strong. This sounds good, right? It is not. It is fatal. A strong currency makes your other exports, coffee, cocoa, textiles, too expensive for the rest of the world to buy. Simultaneously, it makes importing foreign goods incredibly cheap. So Venezuela stopped making things. Why farm when you can import steak from Argentina? Why build cars when you can buy Chevys from Detroit? The domestic industries withered and died. The country became a drug addict, and the drug was oil revenue. By the 1970s, 95% of Venezuela's export earnings came from oil. They had put all their eggs in one black, oily basket. Fast forward to 1999, Hugo Chávez takes power. He inherits a country that is unequal and frustrated, but functional. And then he gets lucky, historically lucky. Oil prices skyrocket from $10 a barrel to over $100. This is where the story shifts from bad economics to institutional suicide. Chavez decides that the oil wealth belongs to the people. In theory, noble. In practice, he turns the state oil company, PDVSA, into a piggy bank. PDVSA was once one of the most efficient oil companies in the world. It operated like a corporation, not a charity. But Chavez needed cash for social programs to maintain political support. He raided PDVSA's coffers. Then came the fatal blow. In 2002, PDVSA management protested. Chavez responded on live television. He fired 18,000 PDVSA employees. He didn't just fire workers, he fired the geologists, the engineers, the technical brains. He replaced them with political loyalists who knew loyalty, not lithology. Production didn't collapse immediately. That is the tricky thing about oil fields. Momentum carries them for a while. But without maintenance, the pipes began to rust. Without reinvestment, the pressure dropped. Accidents increased. Simultaneously, the government declared war on the private sector. They expropriated farms, factories, and supermarkets. Expropriated is a polite word for seizing assets. If you owned a dairy farm, the government took it. But the government didn't know how to run a dairy farm. The cows died. The milk stopped flowing. They implemented price controls. They said, rice is too expensive, it must be sold for $1. But it cost farmers $2 to grow it, so the farmers stopped growing rice. Shortages began. The government's solution? Use the oil money to import rice. As long as oil was $100 a barrel, the illusion held. The party was loud, the music was blaring, and nobody noticed the house was burning down. Then came 2014. The music stopped, oil prices collapsed. Suddenly, the cash flow that paid for the imported food, the imported medicine, and the political loyalty evaporated. A normal country would have some savings, a rainy day fund. Venezuela had nothing. They had spent every dime when times were good. This is where the spiral into the hell accelerated. The government, now under Nicolás Maduro, faced a choice: cut spending or print money. They chose to print. They printed bolivars to pay bills. But with no goods to buy, remember, they destroyed their own agriculture and factories. Too much money chased too few goods. Hyperinflation exploded. We're not talking about 10% inflation. We're talking about 1,000,000%. Prices doubled every few weeks. The currency became worthless. People began weighing money instead of counting it. The minimum wage dropped to a few dollars a month. The zombie economy was born. The government's response was to tighten the noose. They imposed stricter currency controls. This created a black market where the dollar was king. Corruption exploded. If you were a military general, you could get dollars at the official rate of 10 bolivars and sell them on the street for 10,000. You became a millionaire overnight while the people ate out of garbage trucks. And then came the sanctions. It is crucial to be precise here. The economic collapse started before the heavy U.S. sanctions of 2017 and 2019. The patient was already in the ICU. Sanctions just cut the power to the hospital. The U.S. sanctions made it harder to sell oil and harder to move money, yes. But the oil infrastructure was already crumbling. By 2020, production had fallen to levels not seen since the 1940s. We arrive at the recent past, the years 2024 and 2025. The regime tried to pivot. They allowed a de facto dollarization. You could use US dollars in Caracas. For a brief moment in 2025, it looked like there was a pulse. Chevron was allowed to pump some oil again. Exports crept up to nearly 1 million barrels a day. The government claimed the economy grew by 9%, but it was a mirage. The growth was a dead cat bounce, a small recovery from rock bottom. The inequality was medieval. A tiny elite with access to dollars lived in luxury bubbles in Las Mercedes, driving Ferraris, while 80% of the country lived in poverty. The political situation reached its breaking point with the 2024 and 2025 elections. The world saw the fraud. The opposition produced the receipts. But the regime dug in. Repression intensified. The Tren de Aragua gang expanded, becoming a multinational criminal enterprise, arguably Venezuela's most successful export of the decade. By late 2025, the U.S. patience ran out. The oil blockade tightened, the internal pressure cooker was whistling, and now, January 2026, the head of the snake has been cut off. But look at what remains. The debt is estimated between $150 and $170 billion. That is unpayable. The oil infrastructure is not just broken, it is cannibalized. Pipelines were stripped for scrap metal. Refineries operate at 10% capacity. To bring production back to pre-Chavez levels will take an estimated $200 billion in 10 years. The human capital is gone. 8 million Venezuelans left. The engineers are in Houston, the doctors are in Madrid, the teachers are in Bogota. Why is Venezuela poor despite the oil? Because oil is not wealth. Oil is just a resource. Wealth is institutions. Wealth is the rule of law. Wealth is a diversified economy that can survive when the price of a barrel drops. Venezuela is poor because it treated its economy like a slot machine. When the jackpot came, they spent it all and smashed the machine. Now, in 2026, as the world discusses transition and rebuilding, we must be honest. There is no quick fix. You can arrest a dictator in a night, but you cannot rebuild a nation in a day. The oil is still there, underground, waiting. But until Venezuela builds the institutions above ground to manage it, that black gold will remain the devil's excrement.